them, not necessary
so.
for a workshop?
A workshop.
I'm here.
First thing on the agenda is student ridership on Golden Exit. Who would like to start that off?
Who would?
The leader of the committee.
So,
Councilmember Paschal?
yeah, I'm gonna actually be brief. Councilmember Mugrower and I have been working on a plan to propose to both boards and to the community about that. So I'm just gonna pass it on to Matt to kind of work that out.
Thank you, duly elected colleague of the board and the council. If you wouldn't mind, maybe a handout. It's brief, but it goes to the topic at hand. I guess I have a little statement first, or a little blurb. And actually, I borrowed this word for word from, I plagiarized right from one of the school's weekly emails, because I couldn't say it better myself, because it's, whoever put it together succinctly said it, and I thought it was very relevant, and it was very recent that that I got the school email. So thankfully I read it, I opened it and I read it, and Principal at Traeger, know that I read it, thank you. Attendance matters. As parents, we all know that we prepare our children for school in many different ways. Make sure they get enough sleep, hopefully providing a nutritious meal every once in a while, etc. But one of the most important ways to prepare your children for school is by ensuring regular attendance. On time, every time, is a good motto. Children who are in school on a regular basis are more successful in building strong social skills and academic skills. A 2008 study conducted by Rodell Community Scholars at ASU, at Arizona State University, tracked students from kindergarten through high school and found that dropout patterns were directly linked with poor attendance beginning in kindergarten. The study goes on to state, and I quote, "We discovered that as early as kindergarten, differences exist between graduates and dropouts. Namely, dropouts miss more school than graduates. Dropouts missed in this study on average 124 days before 8th grade. And that educators should begin developing strategies to improve student attendance from as early on as kindergarten." This issue has been talked about a bit over the last year or two. I joined council 18 months ago, and I think that's when that group that community group kind of kicked off a little bit. My handout, right from that same email that I received from my elementary school. 2 absences per month, 9 months. That's the difference maker for likely to fall behind in school. There's an issue in front of us that, while two government entities may think it's the other one's problem, I see it as an issue in front of us that both of us can come together and try to address. Compromise is the job of statesmen, is the way I've always told it. So I'm hopeful, maybe through a informed discussion, maybe we can come to an agreement. Maybe we can have the framework of something that we can take away from this group, go back to our collective organizations, think about more, and maybe put it on the floor for a vote, up or down, based upon facts and relevant information. With that, I guess a discussion should probably ensue. I may have a proposal I'd like to put on the table, but I guess I'd like to hear what some others think of the issue itself.
What are some of the facts you're proposing?
Well, and that's, I don't want to put a proposal on the floor yet if I don't know that there's enough support for even going that route. I mean, there are several of us that agree that there is an issue in this community with getting students to school on time, every time. But I don't know, we can talk about the specifics of where they're coming from, whether it's inner city, west side, north side, south side. We can get into the weeds, we can talk specifics. But I think it's a holistic approach. My idea would be to provide no-cost transportation to every single Oshkosh Area School District student to get them to school. That's the start of it. If we, I know through some discussions with City Manager Roloff, he asked about, parochial, what about Valley, what about Lourdes? They're not here at the table at the moment. I think they should be, I think they could be, and at one point, hopefully they will be. but they're not here now. And I think the problem really is between, the Oshawa School District, its students, and getting them to school on time. The reason I believe this is a community issue is we all live here. These are our kids. They're not just, school district kids. They're all our kids. And it's an important issue. With that, I think, does anybody have any thoughts, I guess, on the issue itself before we move forward? Because if there's no support, then it doesn't pay to.
I guess I'd like to hear from the school board. I think, that it's probably important to hear from you guys and hear your thoughts and views on this and,
And I think also too with Mr. Peschel in a dual capacity, you had brought it forward, so, certainly would love to hear what you and your colleagues, are, I guess, thinking.
And I guess too, we need to go back to the Esther study, which we're talking about students that live, 2 miles or less from school? That is what the study showed, because right now, those students that are 2 miles and out do get transportation, right? So we're talking about 2 miles and in on this issue. So that there was apparently enough students that had trouble getting to and from school, to and from extracurricular activities and things like that. So that's really the issue in front of us, is those students that have a hard time getting to school from, and I forget the statistics now, I didn't bring the EST report with me, but there was a significant number of students throughout the city who were having trouble getting to school if their parents couldn't take them, or the weather was not right for them to walk, even though it was a mile or less. So that's the issue, I guess.
Just a clarification, Mr. Herman, it's any student who lives within the city does not receive transportation. Those students who reside outside of the city and they are outside of the 2 mile zone do receive transportation from the school district. Unless there's a hazard situation, and then they also, if it's a hazard situation involved in the route to get to school, then we also provide transportation for those students within 2 miles outside of the city.
And as I understood it, going back a year, this is not a new issue, but what happened was Esther brought it forth as an equity issue. And as I understand it, the state statute city option is why what Superintendent Cartwright was just saying, those students that are in the city and have access to public transit, the school does not have to provide that, but they do for outside the city.
That is correct. And also I want to make note, I think it's very important for council to be aware, because these actions were done in conjunction and full support of all school board members over the course of this past year, even working on ways in which to try to find ways to fund being able to provide transportation for students, even going forward to probe into grant opportunities here within the Oshkosh community, but was not successful with those endeavors. So I just want to put that on the table to make it known that this is not something that we've been sitting on, that we have actually really trying to figure this out in a proactive way over the course of this past year. I know Mr. Evans had some comments as well.
I was just going to say that I think everybody on the school board realizes that this is something that needs to be dealt with. I guess personally, and I would just have liked to see the city put some skin in too. It's just my personal thought.
And going back to Councilmember School Board Peschel, the task force and the meetings where different stakeholders were involved, there was discussion about those cities that do, or those school districts that do have free to students transit. It obviously wasn't free in that those school districts were paying, and it's my understanding that there was somewhat of an agreement with the school district paying, but there was this gap to go from the limited scope to allowing for everyone to have access to that free. And I'm not clear on those other cities whether or not they provide it only for school or if it's just for use in general. But is that kind of where you're going? Is that there's trying to address the gap of
That
what
gap
was
in-
already?
Absolutely, yeah. Trying to get those that are having transit difficulties. And let's be honest, usually they're with, it's out of their control. Especially when we're talking elementary school. When we talk about, information that says as soon as kindergarten, it's not the kid's fault. So trying to get them to school in a safe, efficient, reliable manner is important. So that's where my focus has been, or my reason to get behind something like this is getting that group of students to school each and every day.
I was a substitute principal some years ago in an earlier life at Washington Elementary School. It was in December, January timeframe. And I learned a lot of things through that role. One was that there were a large number of families who had small children, small enough that they needed to be transported in baby buggies or strollers or whatever. And so it was very common for at least one parent to come with the school-aged child or children as well as the infants. And on those really cold days, the school would get phone calls indicating that it was too cold to bring those babies out in those extreme temperatures, or they couldn't get the car started. But they were always very cooperative in saying, as soon as it gets a little warmer and I can get the car started, I'll bring the child to school. So that was a big issue in that school. And we do know that most of our North Side elementary schools run about 60 to 70% free and reduced lunch, even though citywide it's about 41%, I believe. We also had a very articulate student here, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, a freshman who talked about what a big deal it was for her parents to buy her a bus pass for 1 month and how it was difficult for them to pull that money together. I've had conversations with Julie Dumke, who works with some of our more challenged students in terms of financial issues. And while she's indicating that we do buy bus passes at North High School, I'm not sure what the situation is in other schools, those quickly disappear, and they don't have enough for all the kids who come forward. So we know there's a need out there. And I do see it as a community issue, not pointing fingers at anybody or throwing anybody under a bus, no pun intended. But this is an issue for the entire community because it impacts then the parents being able to get to work on time and dropping their kids off and whatever, and making sure that the child goes to school. I used to have a friend who would dutifully drive her granddaughter to school, drop her off at the front door at West High School, watch her go in, but she didn't see her walk out one of the other doors. So getting the child to school is a big deal.
I can only work on one issue at a time on that one. I want to get them there.
Let's just focus on.
You guys try to keep them there.
Okay. That's fair enough. I agree. Thank you.
Jim, how much is a monthly bus pass for a kid?
Right now, it's $35.
Okay.
We don't have like a student rate, it's just one rate for anybody.
So it's they can ride it 10 times a day. They can Sundays, Mondays,
Yep, Monday through Saturday, 6:15 to 6:45.
and
Much as you want.
and the one thing I firmly believe in a hand up. I just do not believe in a handout, and I don't. There is nothing free in this world. I have no problem with creating a student rate and having us subsidize part of it. I don't have the numbers in front of me because I haven't seen your proposal yet or Bob's proposal yet, Matt. So, but I mean, can we just budget for more passes to the schools? I mean, instead of kicking everybody I mean, do we make it a student bus pass that we hand out there? I mean, how do we track this is my concern.
Well, right now, the school district does buy passes from us, and then they, from what I understand, provide them to students in need through the schools.
I know
have-
we spend a lot of money at the Boys and Girls Club, a ton. Do you know what that number is that we spend with you every year buying bus passes?
No, we don't track that.
Okay.
Yeah.
3,000 I was told last year from the Boys and Girls Club.
$3,000 or
A year.
A year. Okay, all right. I can check on the number, but
And I'll also say that there've been a couple of occasions where There have been signs, for example, at St. Vincent's, because if the schools run out, sometimes the families or the students get referred to St. Vincent's to go apply for bus passes there. And on at least 2 occasions within the last 6 months, there have been signs up that said, as early as 1 week into the month, we're out of bus passes. So it's squeezing one place and ending up somewhere else, and then chasing where they might be available.
Well, and I serve on the committee for aging. We also have a significant transportation issue and lack of funds for those that are elderly, disabled. We have the same need there.
So my school district secondarily taking some of those from some of those other entities, it's having an impact on some other parts of our community that are in need of for those as well. That's fair?
Excuse me, I sit on the St. Vincent de Paul Council, and I believe those bus passes are intended for adults. I don't think we're providing many for children, but they're primarily intended for adults.
But I think Ms. Palmieri's or the mayor's point is, there's kind of like not one central need. I think it's kind of community-wide as far as whether it's, children, whether it's those that, maybe are adults that they may not have families, but they're also, are in a situation that they maybe don't have a home, may not have a car, need to get to work. And then, as I said, we also have our elderly right now that we have a significant issue with, and not adequate transportation needs to get them to doctors or to even get them to groceries, things of that nature. So I think, for us as a community, I think we have multiple transportation needs. Unfortunately, I don't think it just sits with one demographic.
I guess I'd kind of like to hear what the proposal is.
So can I just ask a question first, because I honestly don't know. Through, with the school district and different parent programs, is there any maybe particular parent program or anything that's worked on, a public-private relationship in regards to supplying bus passes or, gap, financing or budgeting? Is there any parent group that's maybe working with the private sector at all to maybe help fill that need or that gap? Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of, and again, that's also one of the things where I was mentioning earlier, where we went as a district looking for a community, for a
Gotcha.
grant.
Okay.
That would have,
I understand. Okay.
and even on that, we were targeting for students who qualified for that.
Oh, okay.
That sounds like something that probably like a PTO would take on, but our PTOs kind of reflect our schools, where if it's a high percentage free lunch, the PTO is usually not flush with cash.
Mayor, can I just make a couple points? I think we're all here and we all support taking care of our kids, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. I think it is a community effort agenda item that we got to take care of. The children are the most important people in the city. I mean, they're our future. They're the reasons why a lot of us have jobs, to take care of our children. I was just wondering if there would be like a possibility. I know like you guys pay a bus pass every year, and I don't want to jump over on Matt's ideas, but just another idea. About you guys pay about $20,000 a year, correct?
$22,100.
Yeah. So I mean, if we could do a portion of that as the city, and I know like every school system is different, and my kids actually go to Winneconne because my wife's the school nurse for that district, so we send them there. But at the beginning of the year, we pay a small fee to have them go to the school. If we possibly could wrap in like $2-3 on the fees, nobody's gonna miss that. Nobody's gonna, if that's legal or just an idea.
Part of it does restrict, we can always add it on, but if there's a family that can't afford to pay for it, then we're required to cover the cost.
I know the poverty level's around 40%, so I mean the other 60%.
Approximately 42%.
Yeah.
And that is for the individuals who have applied for that. However, what I can tell you is, even though now, based off the numbers that we have, working with the federal government, 60% of our schools right now qualify for 100% of our students receiving free breakfast and free lunch. So I think the 42%, we may see some differences in that, where in fact in the next couple weeks, we're going to be doing some push in order to encourage families to complete those applications because of the benefits that it can provide for their students. And I believe that will probably give us a better, more accurate percentage.
Yeah, because I think this is a long overdue topic. I mean, we've been kicking this around for 2-3 years, and it's a very small amount of money in the big picture when the school board and the city throws around hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. And this is actually the root of the whole idea of school is the kids.
For what it's worth, because I think it's important that we have the proper context in terms of, and Jim mentioned skin in the game, the city already subsidizes transit by $750,000 of taxpayer money. That's City of Oshkosh residents. That's not residents of the town of Algoma, the town of Black Wolf. The proposal here is for all students in the Oshkosh area school district.
Wait, who made that proposal? I haven't heard that that was the proposal.
That's what's been discussed from day one about school,
Yeah.
all students,
I
all
believe
students.
in the task force, there was a distinction about city, students who lived in the city because we don't serve outside the city. So somehow that got lumped in
Well,
together.
but the other day, there was a question, can the kids take, get the bus for free from Traeger over to the Y? A large number of the Traeger kids are not city residents. And
Gotcha.
I have a fiscal fiduciary responsibility to the citizens of Oshkosh, and I think it's important to point that out. We subsidize a good deal of the police school liaison program. That benefits all students in the Oshkosh area school district. Police department, we pay the lion's share of that program. So if we're going to be doing this, if we want to put things on the table, we need to consider other things on the table because it's more than just busing. And we need the PSLs in the school because it is important. And there's a lot of stuff that gets preempted with the value that our officers provide. So if we're going to be talking about this, and I don't know what the issue is, but whatever we talk about, we need to talk about other issues as well.
So what is?
With,
Yeah.
with that said, I know City Manager Roloff and I have had some very frank discussions on this topic, and I completely respect his position on it. However, we can get real muddy, we can get in the weeds and still and talk about all the, the ancillary things, the town of Algoma, the Kind Mine, Black Wolf, and how that affects them. We can talk about the city having more skin in the game. I'll use your quote. We can talk about those things, and I think there's some council members that would enjoy that conversation a little bit. I don't want to go there. I want to stay on topic at the topic on hand, at the topic of getting these kids to school and getting them fast, getting them there daily. So with that, we're going to put this on the table and consider it. So as this goes around, this is something Council Member Peschel and I, School Board Member Peschel and I, have discussed recently. Let me read it for those that are listening at home, and as it goes around the table, feel free to listen, and if you wouldn't mind just maybe holding off till I get to the end, so you take a whack at me for my ideas. Whereas the City of Oshkosh and the Oshkosh Area School District recognize the value and importance of safe and reliable transportation for students, while at the same time recognizing that GO Transit is not able to fully fund no-cost transportation for all students in the Oshkosh Area School District, as well as recognizing it is not reasonable to expect the Oshkosh Area School District to provide school busing for all students in their school system. I propose, along with Councilmember Peschel, the City and Oshkosh Area School District agreed to the following: a 3-year commitment towards a program aimed at improving public transit access for all students in the Oshkosh Area School District. And that's what we're really talking about, it's access, allowing them the ability to hop on a bus to get to school safely or to get home safely. We agreed to this commitment in order to provide sufficient time to implement, improve, and then finally analyze the effectiveness of the program. And that's why 3 years, I think, is important on that. A 1-year agreement doesn't mean much, and a 5-year agreement may be way too long for the ability to analyze it. We as well as agreed the Oshkosh Area School District and city staff, the transit department specifically, will work to determine the most appropriate tracking system to confirm the true and accurate number of users and determine the true and actual costs. Because at this point, while I respect the process Transit Director Collins is using. We don't know that that's the true and accurate cost, and it could be very well be higher, it could actually be lower, but we don't know it for certain 100%. City of Oshkosh and the Oshkosh Area School District each will pledge $25,000 annually in support towards making public transportation available to all students in the Oshkosh Area School District. Any funds that are needed above that, I should have adjusted this a little bit, but any funds needed above that will come from private or public sector support other than the City of Oshkosh for this important community issue. Basically, we would be willing to support $25,000, and the rest has got to get found through some other partnerships and some other sources, whether that's school district willingly increasing their portion. We talked to some of our other community partners. We have other stakeholders that are available to be in the game if they're interested, that we reach out to them. On the city side, initial support for 2020 would be funded by Oshkosh surplus revenue from 2019. Going forward, we would then appropriately budget within the transit budget. Would be the thought, if something moved fast, it could be implemented January 1 and run concurrent with our fiscal year. I know that's not your fiscal year, but we can haggle on the details of that. And then this one was an important one that kind of came from some some private sector potential supporters. Private sector support would be limited to the initial 3-year term. And then going forward, it would fall upon the City of Oshkosh, along with the Oshkosh Area School District, to come back to the table and determine if this is something that they fully intend to continue going on without that private support.
Question.
I assume there's quite a few.
So would that $25,000 pledge on both sides include the already $22,000 they're spending, or would it be in addition to what they're already spending?
Very good question. At the moment, that number includes their at the moment it's 22. I know over the last 3 years it averaged a little over 18,000 from the numbers I was supplied. Sounds like 2019, 2020 is a little higher, but at the moment the proposal would include that amount. So yes, it can be viewed that they're getting a good deal, they being the school district. I'm choosing not to take that point of view. I'm hopeful that other people will be reasonable in their approach to it, that still in the end, it's 25 from one entity, 25 from another entity, and we find the rest from somewhere else.
Well, and I think it's good that you put in here the tracking recommendation, because
Absolutely.
one of the things that came up in those multiple meetings was a discussion about, is the gap 50, is it 70, and if all students had the access, we know that all students would not use it. So that actual usage seems to be an important piece of the puzzle.
And that was the intention. As with any new program, whether it's public or private, that first year initial installment is a rocky year. Second year, usually you seek to improve upon the deficiencies and where it lacks, and then usually by year 3, you should be getting pretty good at it and has a pretty good basis for determining if it's something viable going forward in the future. So that was the impetus behind a 3-year commitment.
So Matt, what you're saying is this money would go to buy bus passes, and then the school would be responsible for giving out the bus passes?
No, in theory, it's very similar to the contract we had with Fox Valley Technical College, or the contract we had with UW Oshkosh, where basically any student can hop on board. They don't need a pass, an actual bus pass. Now, that's where it would fall on staff from both sides to figure out the best way to have a way of tracking, whether it's a school ID for everyone from kindergarten on up, or some other form of identification that the bus drivers can somehow track. I would have that, it's an important feature. I know Mr. Collins would not necessarily enjoy that process very much, but it would be something that staff would have to figure out.
I'm not clear how the sausage is made here.
Yeah.
That's what worries me. So,
The arrangement we have with the universities and the colleges are that it's just a matter of showing their student ID.
okay, all right.
I mean, we try to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah,
I don't know if
they
it's
just have to have a current student ID. We had some issues with that.
Current student ID.
Is it tallied, or is it swiped, or does that not matter? Or does
No, we don't have that technology yet. We have tablets, so they would show, they have a.
They just
basically,
flash it.
They show them their ID, and the driver hits a button on their tablet. in this case, would say, like Oshkosh School, you know, and they would just hit the button.
Okay.
So is there an opportunity to also ask the surrounding towns that have school children utilizing that to,
Pot in.
That would
Come
be
in.
part of the process. That's got to come from somewhere else. That other, at the moment, what we estimate to be roughly $19,000 has to be found from somewhere else.
But I think that generally the answer is no, because, and they're gonna say, we get school buses, and the school district pays for the school buses for the rural kids.
Also, just kind of clarification, I guess, since it would be Go Transit providing the transit, I take it all private dollars would go to the city? Who would track that and who would be responsible for that in their budget? Because that's not identified here.
Sure.
I mean, what happens if a private donor says, I'm only going to give to the school district for this program? Can we do that?
Well, I would
I
hope
mean,
that,
they're just
I get that.
throwing scenarios out there because there are private donors that may say they aren't going to give to the city. Or vice versa, we won't give to the school district, but we'll give to the city. So
think that's
I know we have one finance director here, I don't know if ours is here, Mr. Van Gompel, but, you know, they would have to probably have a separate budget and dollars would have to be tracked in, out, and
I have full faith and trust in both of our staffs that they can figure that out. Not that I'm not willing to discuss that at that level, but I think that's secondary to the other parts of it. You know, do we have support? Is this something that's attainable? Is it something that's reasonable? Is it something that's budgetarily wise, responsible enough? And those are all that, you know, those are individual questions, I know, and you got to individually answer those.
right.
Jim, you want to chime in here? Any thoughts that you have that you want to share with us on this? No? All right.
No, unless you have any questions, I can answer.
Well, I mean,
All
I
right.
think when this discussion first came up, and I think it was when we were at the school district, you had numbers of what that would cost roughly.
Yeah, so at that time, and it's close, we were talking about 69,000. At that time, the school district purchased about 19,000 in passes, so that number was from a couple years ago. It sounds like Vicky has the current number. And then we get about 50,000 in basically revenue from students or families who purchase cash fare. So that's where we get the 69,000. And I did look at it again earlier this year because our fares did go up on January 1st. However, our ridership's down a little bit from students and from everyone in general. So that number's still pretty relevant. We don't, like Councilmember Muggerower alluded to, the best way I have of estimating that right now is estimating what our ridership is on school days and days that there aren't school or the public schools are off. And then I took like a 6-month average and figured out what that difference is. And we've done that for a couple of years, and those numbers are still pretty relevant. So that's why we're talking about $69,000.
but that number would go up if the demand went up. So if we say all students have access, and then it stresses those routes to the max and beyond, then we're in a situation where the cost goes up to add trippers, correct?
Right, yeah, so that would have to be part of any agreement that if ridership went up to a level where we couldn't handle it with our current routes, then we would have to talk about who's gonna pay that additional cost for which would be additional bus service, which is sometimes referred to as a tripper, which means it's an extra route that they run specifically for schools. So I know that, for example, the Appleton School District has a program, it's a pretty old program, but they have a revenue agreement with the school district for basically free busing for their students. However, they also fund a couple tripper routes that the school district requested, and the school district pays for those in addition to their revenue agreement.
Just point of clarifying question. Are there certain routes that exist currently, though, right now that are currently full, where we probably need trippers, but we are not doing that?
I would say right now, we wouldn't add trippers proactively. We would see what the additional ridership is, and then if they were needed, then we would have to discuss that. Currently, we have, with students, you don't really see a lot of elementary ridership, but basically we're talking about middle school and high school, mostly high school. We have 2 buses that serve Oshkosh West at release and 2 that serve Oshkosh North. And at both schools, one of the buses is fuller than the other one. so there is capacity on the second bus at both schools. It might be just a matter of some students adjusting to take the second bus instead of the first bus. Some of them go to similar areas, just depending where you live. One of them might be more convenient than the other one, and one of them arrives a little bit earlier. However, I would say the first bus is close to full, the second bus isn't so much, so there is capacity available if we could balance those buses out a little better.
When you say the second bus, do you mean 30 minutes later or
Yes.
at the same time?
No, well, no, there's two routes that serve each school. They're
Oh,
within the
okay,
same
I
half
see what you're
hour.
saying,
But
different.
yeah. So Route 3 and Route 6. Route 6 goes to Oshkosh West before and after school, and then we have Route 3, which we deviate after school to also serve West. That one isn't quite full. And then we have Route 4 and 2 that serve Oshkosh North. One of them's a little bit fuller than the other one, but there's capacity, I guess is what I'm saying, there's capacity currently between those two routes at each school.
Different routes are more convenient than others. Some it works out great for either route, but sometimes it's a little more inconvenient because the Route 4 is the north side loop. So say if somebody's in Menominee South area, that wouldn't serve them, they'd have to transfer their bus. So it's little details like that.
Couple concerns. I do support the program, but when kids are bused on school buses, it's a child environment. When they're bused on a city bus, there's adults. There's no face of evil. There's evil people all over. How young would we allow these kids to travel alone? Their responsibility, a 6-year-old's responsibility to watch which station to get off at. Bus drivers probably don't have the ability or time to remind this kid way in the back that they got to get off. Parents' judgment that their 6-year-old is mature enough to get on the bus because they want to sleep in or they're too lazy to take their kids to school. I just kind of have a part of me that's fearful of the kids, of people possibly putting them in danger on the buses.
I'll just share my granddaughter's experience. She did fine, and I've seen really young children on the bus, and I've been very impressed with our bus drivers that they're very cognizant.
So they'd have to take
of
on a new
that,
role,
even if
would you
they.
agree?
She was nervous about pulling the little signal.
But how old is she?
Well, at the time when she first started, she was 9.
So I mean, there's kids as young as 5 or 6 that
Yeah.
potentially could be shoved
Yeah.
on these
But
buses.
if there are more kids on the bus too, right?
But there's always that kid sitting in the back that's just staring out the window, and an hour later they're still on the bus and they miss school, and so the bus drivers might need to be coached a little on this is part of their responsibility now to make sure these kids get off. I don't know if that's
I'll
their
speak
role.
up for our drivers. I agree with the mayor. Our drivers are awesome, and they would adjust. I'll give you the financial side because that's my job. But the other part is we have awesome drivers, and they darn near know exactly where these kids live, and they're gonna say be careful crossing the street, do this, do that. They're very, very good about that. That I wouldn't worry about. But in reality, it's going to be mostly middle and high school kids. In reality.
I can support this in some manner or fashion. I think some details need to get worked out. I don't know, two things. I don't know if we can take a $25,000 hit in our first year. Maybe we could do something smaller and ease into this over the 3-year period. But the other thing is, how do we track the success of this? I mean, is this just another social program that doesn't have any, tracking to it? So that's my concern. So I mean, how do we measure the success of this after, 1, 2, 3 years?
attendance rates, maybe?
I think that's actually one of the major points of this is that we wanted to create a way. We wanted to create a way for this information to be tracked. And so, Jim already indicating that that if we were to go with just a student ID on this, that could be the way that we track the numbers and how many people are using it, when they're using it. By capturing that information, it gives us the picture of what that system's going to be like, not only right away if we were to kick it off in January 1, but the ability to adjust that, to be able to look at that and also adjust how that works in year 2 and year 3. So that's a major component of this, is that we haven't, many of us on the council and in the school district and in the community have not felt that there's been qualified information, data, to be able to move forward with this, and that's what this does.
I can also guarantee that the ridership will go way up, way up. If parents don't have to take their kids to school, they won't. So the numbers are gonna be a lot higher than we anticipate. And I remember when I was in high school and then had to go to West. We had a bus pick me up on Bowen, right by my house. My parents didn't have to take me to school. Why would they? If I can go ride the bus for free. So you're gonna see increased ridership of parents saying, take the bus. I don't have to take you. Take the bus.
Which
So you're
might
gonna see a
help with some
lot
of the
more
traffic.
increase of people that got their kids to school on their own, taking advantage of this program, which I think is fine. I don't have a problem there. But I think our numbers are way low, way, way low. Once parents realize they don't have to take their kids to school, they can just hop on the bus.
Which kind, well, sorry.
And we can also track the data through attendance rates
Right.
at our schools and such. We can also subdivide that out into,
Right.
potentially into regions and.
Right. You know, and like I said, I'm not against this, but I do think that you're gonna see an increase because of just the ability to say, go.
I think,
Well,
if you wouldn't mind, if I could make one little on that part. I hope ridership goes up. I'll say it flat out. I do hope ridership goes up. Because at some point, then, maybe public transportation is a viable first option for some.
Could be.
Hopefully. Maybe that stigma that is there, that even though it's not talked about, it's there, maybe at some point in this community gets broken. Or at least gets brought down a notch.
But are we really hitting the core of the problem, which is really the lower income students who say their parents can't get them to work or they don't have transportation options to get to work? And we're actually enabling people that should be taking their kids to work to take advantage of it.
But I don't think we need to worry about the parents, we can just worry about the kids.
But what I do think we need to look at is, to Mr. Mugerauer's point, and I would definitely say that Mr. Collins would agree, we have the equipment, we want to see our buses full, we do want to see that. But neither one of our entities have the luxury of going into any deficits during any year. We can't borrow from the bank or like a private business if your budget exceeds and you take a line of credit. It doesn't work that way. So if our transportation system doesn't grow organically, but all of a sudden we're hit, and then we have to look at additional equipment, drivers, fuel costs, those types of things, that's a different story. So I think we just have to be mindful that it is a goal. We do want to have that, but it's much differently to grow over a 2, 3, 4, 5 year time period versus 9 months. So I think we just have to also remember that, because if we run over in a particular line item, as you all know, you're going to have to take from some other area in order to offset and compensate. So we just have to think about that as well.
And I want to just make sure you all agree that by us doing something here today, that you believe kids are going to show up significantly more. That's what you're telling me. Is that accurate?
I'm not going to necessarily say the word significantly, because we do have a pretty good attendance rate. I think what we are going to find is for those students who struggle to be able to have access, to be able to get to school, that is where we will see a difference.
So do we have a percentage, a number that you have in mind of kids that struggle to get to school? I mean, just to allow me to visualize that. I mean,
Can I just say something? I don't think it's measurable because, I mean, we don't know these kids' lives from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock going to school. We don't know if they're walking a mile in the rain to get to school. I mean, if we can make their lives easier.
no, but what I was asking is how many kids what I'm saying is how many kids today in the school district have a hard time getting there? That we can measure, right?
We
I
all
mean,
don't
so-
know their
So
personal
that
stories.
study was done by Esther, but it was not necessarily a full detailed study, but there was enough concern that came out of that study that it was thought that it could be improved. But what I am curious about, though, is especially in those school areas, which we've got another agenda item on here to talk about later this evening, if more of those parents are putting those children on the buses, isn't that fewer cars congesting those areas where we're short on crossing guards or we're having other traffic issues? I guess that was one of the other things about making full use of the transit system. And then the surplus thing, I'm not really clear on that, but I can tell you that having purchased numerous passes that got lost multiple times, some of them go unused. Or they may not necessarily use them every day, even if you purchase the full $35 pass. So the buses still have to run regardless of how many people are on them, right?
Yep.
So, and I don't want to stifle conversation because this is probably the most productive conversation that's taken place in a good 18 months on this issue. We've gone for a little over 45 minutes on the topic. Might it be appropriate for a small group of people to meet separately to continue the conversation and report back to their respective entities? My thought would be maybe myself, Councilmember Peschel, one more school board member, Dr. Cartwright, Mr. Roloff, and any important staff, that maybe we set up a time to continue discussions and then we report back to our councils and our boards.
That's fine. I have one more question for the school board. Are you willing to do this regardless of what our starting number is annually? I mean, to kick this off? I mean, if we say we can't swallow the 25 this year, but we'll start it out at X, are you still going to move forward with your 25?
Well, I think, Mr. Miller, in all fairness, I think they have to meet separately and discuss their budget. You know, I don't think we could ask them to
Okay.
answer that question.
None of them knew that I was bringing
okay.
this. So
Okay.
They were.
I thought this was maybe coming from you guys, so all right, okay.
They were well informed 30 minutes ago.
Okay.
Not prior to this. That
All right.
So they have no knowledge beforehand that they needed to bring any
Like-
additional information to
Okay.
the table to help the
And
And we would
conversation.
never want to put you in a position to have to speak
Uninformed.
uninformed.
Yeah.
Would that be appropriate? Would that be acceptable to
absolutely.
So that would repeat the process that was already done.
hopefully a better
and
process?
hopefully coming up with a different result.
Correct, and in a quicker timeline.
Well, it has to
I
be
mean,
because our budgets are all coming up now.
Yeah.
So,
I mean-
the thought is that if we were to convene to another group, subgroup, is that there would be an understanding that we would provide a much quicker outcome so that we can start to address transportation needs of children. So,
My idea, as I mentioned, my idea would be myself as a board member. Mr. Peschel is obviously duly elected, but one more board member that maybe by volunteer, as well as leadership from both sides, could then attempt to just, not necessarily negotiate, but come to some common ground that we can then report back, and then it's a vote up or down on both sides. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, but I'm also a realist. And so information is key, though.
Kelly Olmsted is the chair of our Facilities and Finance Committee, so she may be an appropriate one to be on there, or, you know, we can find another board member if it's me or if it's one of our other 5 people, but we can find someone that won't be a problem, and we may want to include our executive director of finance as well.
Would council be okay if I appoint myself to that, basically?
You have as many jobs as you want, Matt.
I just want to make
Go
sure
for
that my fellow council members have a chance at the topic as well, though, if they would so like it.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, then, I'm going to hand that one off to Mr. Roloff to set up an appropriate time for a small group to meet, and the two
Dr.
staffs can
Cartwright
figure
and
it
I
out.
can get together, knowing that there is more, I think, joint consensus about this. I didn't feel we had it in the past. I feel that there's more consensus. I still have my concerns. I think everybody heard them, and I'm going to keep repeating them. But I think knowing that there seems to be some consensus on wanting to do something, but I think if there's going to be some private sector support, we need to develop a strategy to do some outreach on that as well. And we just can't just cross our fingers and hope we get that, because that'll never happen unless we take an affirmative initiative to work on that.
All right, well, we have 10 to 7. We have 2 more items on the agenda, so are we good with where it's at now? Okay,
I think so.
all right. The next discussion, I think, is actually connected. The Oshkosh Area School District Facility Advisory Committee discussion as it relates to locations of schools. Dr. Cartwright?
So during the summer, the school board authorized us to create what is known as the Facilities Advisory Committee. And they were formed with 3 purposes, 3 objectives as they are meeting. So one is to create proposed options, renovations, upgrades that support learning environments which are safe, accessible, efficient, and equitable. The second is the purposeful spaces that inspire innovative learning, accommodate evolving technology, and promote collaboration amongst students, staff, parents, and community within 3 to 4 track elementary and 8 to 10 track middle school. So let me put that in layman's terms. 3 to 4 track means that at each grade level in elementary schools, you have 3 to 4 kindergarten classes, 3 to 4 first grade classes. 8 to track also is similar in concept. The suggested and then finally, the suggested recommendations that shall maximize use, reuse, and/or replacement of existing facilities and shall be cost-effective for the taxpayer, providing for an enduring end product that is energy efficient and adaptable for decades to come for the future of the Oshkosh Area School District students. Currently, the average age of our facility is 78 years old. The typical lifespan for a facility for the purposes of educational use is without major renovations or those kind of things, is typically between 50 and 60 years old. So as you can see, we are well beyond the lifespan on average, not all. And so.
We have sewer systems older than that, so we're tracking you very well.
No, it's all good. It is all good. I mean, for example, a lot of times people say, okay, so what is, today somebody even asked me, they said, what is the oldest school that's actually in the district? It's actually Reed Elementary, but it's had a major renovation.
Right.
And then from there, it was Smith, and then from there, now is Merrill, built in 1900. So that facility is 119 years old, almost 120. The Facility Advisory Committee is comprised of a variety of different individuals, and it's purposely done that because we want to ensure that we had a diverse group that was meeting and having some very candid conversations. So we have parents, and we specifically look for parents that maybe parents that may have a child with a disability, maybe a parent of an ELL child, maybe a parent from a higher socioeconomic, maybe from a lower socioeconomic level. So we did diversification related to that. We also invited, so for example, Mi Yang from the Hmong Community Center. We invited both legislators, so both Gordon Hens as well as Mike Schra, thank you. We've also we have our student representatives, so from both of our high schools that come to our school board members, both of them are participating as well. We have a representative from the Chamber of Commerce that's on there. We have a representative from Go EDC. So as you can see, it's a very diverse group that have been coming. We get, though we invited about 25 people on a regular attendance, we get probably about 15 people per meeting. We just completed the 4th meeting last night, and we have 2 more meetings that are coming forward. So the next meeting is on October 28th at North High School, and then the last meeting that's scheduled is November the 11th at West High School. What's important to note right now is that you should be receiving any day now, if you haven't already, a survey, a community survey that's in your mailbox coming through, where we're asking for input because the committee needs some additional information in order to have these conversations. Included on that survey is talking about what's the tolerance for merging schools, because in order for us to get to the 3 to 4 track elementary school or the 7 to 8 track middle school, it does mean that we have to merge schools. You're probably asking, well, why do you want to do that anyway? Well, quite frankly, it's about the children. It truly is about the children. Some of the things that happen, for example, we have staff right now that put a lot of windshield time in going from school to school. We have staff that go from West High School to North High School. We have staff that go from elementary to elementary during the day. Who's benefiting from that? It's not our kids. And the taxpayers are having to pay for the gas on that, as well as the time. So that's one major thing. In addition to that is also the ability to balance our classes a lot better. So when you have a student where there's only one track, there's only one section available, well, what happens when there's a personality clash that's happening in the classroom? Sometimes kids need a break from one another, and you can't give them that opportunity. And services, even things that we can provide for our services. Right now, we know that there are some needs, high-level, intense needs on some of our students, not due to nothing that they have done, but they have some concerns that are related potentially for behaviors. Well, I can't afford to put, the district, we can't afford to put a behavior interventionist at every one of our schools. So that's one of those staff members that are going from site to site to site. School psychologist, site to site to site. School social worker, site to site to site. So when you're consolidating schools, what ends up happening is then we're able to also consolidate some of those services, and we're able to provide more to our children. And it's obviously a more cost-effective way as well, because in addition to that, it's the space of the facilities themselves. And so it's some of those conversations that we're looking at, and the Facility Advisory Committee is also discussing, okay, what are some of those sites that maybe we do want to do a renovation on versus maybe rebuilding a site in order to accommodate these things. So those are some of the conversations that are happening. As I mentioned before in the survey, it actually we're looking at this as a multi-phase approach. We didn't get here overnight. So we know it's going to take us over a period of time to be able to resolve this as well. For phase one, which is what's in the survey, it does talk again about the first question is about this idea of consolidation, which everything I just explained to you, we lay out in some of the explanation prior to the question actually coming. And the second thing we do talk about is a consolidation of two middle schools, which would be Merrill and Webster. Because again, the Merrill School, it meets a lot of the criteria for which we're extremely concerned about. It's a 119-year-old building. And I want to make sure everyone's completely aware of this, it's not that the district has not been maintaining our buildings. In fact, it's because we have maintained our buildings that they've lasted this long. But there is a lifespan. So we're looking at that. Third question is also taking a look at, obviously we have to look at the elementary side of house on this as well, because Merrill as well as Webster are, you have your elementary as well as your middle school. So looking at the tolerance as far as what that would look like for an elementary school option as well. I failed to mention the second question. The school questions are actually the third and fourth questions. The second question is actually more related to funding, that immediate funding, where we do need to put on some new roofs until we can get to these things, as well as some school safety concerns that we're trying to address in the immediate future right now. On these Facility Advisory Committee meetings, if you go to the district website, and if you just look on the right-hand side, even there's a link that says Facility Advisory Committee meetings. We're not doing anything behind closed doors. We've been advertising this. We put out at every one of our schools, there's a big flyer that's available. I've been talking about it. I know Bob Brunel's talk show at the show. We even this last recently on Eye on Oshkosh, I spoke about it there. We post, now the very first meeting we weren't able to do a video of it, but all the other subsequent meetings we have videotaped as well, so that the audience, anyone could come in and see this. We have the presentations are all loaded as well, so if anyone wants to see what the PowerPoints are all there. We're trying our extreme best to be as transparent as humanly possible. We want the community to be aware of what these discussions are, because as I said before, we're just at that point. I know, and I'm hoping I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I know this board does not want to be put into the position for which they were just put into here just a few months ago. I know, as from our administration staff, we do not want to be put into that position of having to make that last minute recommendation to them, because we didn't know, we had a really, really rotten winter. And whereas before we thought we could patch the roof, we can't. and then put that on top of the cost of the deferred maintenance cost, on top of a declining enrollment, to where it was just very, very small. So it's just, we just don't want to be in that position again.
Mr. Cartwright, has the Facility Advisory Committee connected with any of the city planning staff? Because some of those consolidations obviously require closure at some location, which can make or break a neighborhood, can make or break a transit route or more transportation issues. I guess my question is, whether or not before that survey or in conjunction with that survey, there's some planning with staff, and I think Mr. Roloff and you and I have touched on that topic, but at what point do you see the two entities coming together to make informed decisions for the board?
Most certainly. So a lot of this is.
I'm going to the Howard to see the concert tonight, so I apologize, but I have.
No, go.
Nice to see
I'm
you,
going
Jim.
Oshkosh West, so I got one on you, Jim. So I'm going.
Enjoy your evening.
Good night.
So a lot of this is going to be related, so for example, right now, what we're looking at with the consolidation of the Merrill Webster site, it allows for the middle school using the existing Merrill site. So it's not like you're completely, we're looking at ways in which to, and that's some of the discussion that's actually occurred last night and is continuing at the next meeting, is really what property is conducive in order to be able to handle some of this, the load on this. There are some of the property that, quite frankly, is just too small in order to accommodate some of the consolidation. So
I guess I would just
and I know
offer
Mark
up,
and I have also been.
as the mayor
a little bit, yeah.
suggested, we can certainly assign a planner to be part of the group. And you've already got the committee set up, but certainly to be there to lend their insight, because it will have housing implications. May not as likely if you're just doing some consolidations in certain locations, but they will have impacts on neighborhoods. We want to make sure that we're prepared for that. And then as you're evaluating different sites, we can offer insight into that. So I would certainly offer that up, and if you'd like, I can assign a planner to join you for that effort.
And Mr. Roloff, if you remember back, some years ago, Miss Gardner, Allison Gardner, had participated in some planning meetings, as far as, some of the development that was being proposed regarding housing and how it would impact some of the school districts. So, obviously, too, if we know that there may be something that would be impactful to the school district, extend an invite to see if maybe perhaps, so that they know that meeting is going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know Ms. Gardner valued that time and that information very much.
And at some point, Ms. Allison Osby, you and I had talked about a field trip with
Yes, we did.
council members to see some of our schools and
Some of the
kind
challenges that you
some of
were
the
facing.
challenge. Yeah, and we never followed through with that. So I'd like to follow through with that. I think that's a good idea, to get council members into some of our schools so you can see.
And I think we even talked about too, maybe perhaps, an invite to maybe some key leadership like at the chamber and at
Right.
GoEDC, that maybe they would find that useful as well. Because I think if at any point, there needs to be community buy-in, I think knowledge is power.
Well, and that's where the neighborhood associations can be effective. We're up to what, 15 now, 16?
18.
18 neighborhood associations. They're mostly on the north side of the city, but at the same time, we all know that people buy homes in certain areas of the city based on the schools that are in that area of the city. Some businesses locate in certain areas of the city based on the schools that are in that area. So I think there's a lot of misconception that the city controls the schools. I got called by Channel 5 last week wanting to know when we're building a new school on the west side of Oshkosh.
I got the same call as well, Mr. Herman.
Yep. And that discussion was actually a fire station, not a school. But I think a lot of people don't realize, because the bill comes from the city of Oshkosh, that they think we have the same input on all the different government entities. So I think it is important anytime the school district's looking at facilities that the city has some input. It's just my thinking.
I think it's it's something that we can definitely bring back and have a conversation with the board about to see about the addition on this, just for a direction, and we could add that to our next agenda, as a part of our conversation. In those discussions, and again, I think it's you, Mr. Herman, you bring up a very good point, because oftentimes schools often are what are the drivers within a lot of those communities. Look at what happened to Oak Lawn.
Yep.
You cannot ask for a better situation, because think about what the community was prior and look at it now.
Right.
It completely helped develop that area.
And on the other end of the spectrum, look at what happened when Lincoln School was closed in a very central city, dense neighborhood, and things were divided up. So there's those positives, and then there's those negative externalities. So if
Well, more than that, you got Dale School closed, Jefferson School closed, Longfellow School closed. Those are all northeast side schools. So they basically closed, and this was long before you folks were there. I mean, I was in grade school.
I went to Dale School.
Yeah. So anyways, all I'm saying is that the northeast side of Oshkosh lost a lot of schools in about a 10-year period, which really precipitated to the growth to the west side of Oshkosh, because there were no schools on this side of the city. That's really what was the push to when Oshkosh North got built in 1972. The doctors and lawyers said, enough, we need a school on the north side of Oshkosh.
Well, I would, to Ms. Carlin's offer to have a tour, you provide the tour guide, I'll provide the bus.
Awesome.
There you go.
How's that? And maybe that's, because I do have there's a 7:30 concert at Oshkosh West, folks. So I plan to be there, so.
we have one more item on the agenda. Are we, everybody good?
Good.
Yep.
So update on the Minnesota and 11th Avenue intersection. Who would like?
I'm going
got
to
that one?
handle that just
Right.
to give a little update. Appreciate all the input that we received. I think a lot of the discussions earlier about transit are very relevant, because anything we can do to minimize traffic around Jefferson School or any school is absolutely welcome. The Transit Advisory Board had voted to recommend to the council to put a four-way stop sign. I do have some authority to declare a public safety emergency, so in advance of council formalizing a four-way stop next Tuesday, I directed staff to put up the four-way stop. We had put the two-way stop up. I'm not a fan of yield signs, so I was happy to do that. And we'll keep monitoring it. I think part of it may improve once Oregon Street is really open and free-flowing. That, I think that'll help a little bit. The police are out there to keep an eye on folks, and will, shush people along, because a lot of it's, we love our parents. I'm sure an engaged parent group is exactly what you want at every school, but we needed to be engaged in other things other than just hanging out for 20 minutes. And for 20 minutes, it's absolutely awful there. And then 20 minutes later, it's all good. So anything we can do to encourage parents to look for alternate ways, whether it's walking school buses or walking, there's a lot of different options, I think, that are available. We do have 3 crossing guards that serve Jefferson School. That's the most of any school in the district. We have a couple more at 3, but we already provide 3 crossing guards there. So we're going to keep monitoring it. Dr. Cartwright and I have been chatting about it periodically. Mr. Collins is more than happy to help, and the police department will continue to do that. That's the type of stuff we're going to have to, we had to throw it together because it happened very quickly. Those are the types of things we're going to have to engage about as we have future discussions. So happy to help and continue to help in that regard.
And that's exactly an example of where some of these decisions the school district makes impacts other areas. Not that it's not manageable, but that if some more preview and discussion happened, with perhaps some planning staff involved, there just might be a way to get ahead of it as opposed to reacting to it after the fact.
I will say, though, I was very appreciative of staff from the city that did coordinate with us over the summer in order to try to plan for this prior to school starting.
It was a short window.
And another one that maybe doesn't have a direct impact, but Oak Lawn School's not too far away, and neither is North. We now have made Linwood in Wisconsin a four-way stop intersection. It used to be Wisconsin and Viola, but now with Quick Trip and the Casey's in that area, it made more sense for the advisory board to make a four-way stop, and that did get approved at the last council meeting. And there was a temporary stop signs on, I think, Wisconsin right now.
And that has been quite fun to watch.
Oh, I'm
because
sure.
for those that don't know it's there, they come on it, and I've never seen so many breaks and, because all of a sudden they come upon it.
And then I think it's worked where we put that no left turn on Jackson and New York from 3 PM to 7. That was a recommendation from actually the neighborhood association and the school. So those are a lot of mutual traffic-related issues. So it's good. It's good to have good discussions.
So next would be just a decision on our next joint meeting. So 3 months out, if we're going 3 months, would be off into January.
Yeah, maybe at the school board offices. Works.
What date is,
Oh,
I
that's-
built,
You know, we'll have
Staff will have
to
to figure that
coordinate
out.
dates. Can't probably put a specific date in there now, can we?
but you guys are first and third Wednesdays, right?
No.
Second and fourth
We're
Wednesday.
the same, we're on the same cycle.
Yeah. So,
All
all right.
Well, thank you for your time.
yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Appreciate the discussion.
Absolutely.